now that we know, we've got to clarify our message because our customers' brains just aren't paying attention to us. How are we going to do it? Well, we're going to do it using the elements of story. I just lost some of you because you're sitting there going, okay, this sounds really artsy-fartsy and I'm not here to write a movie. I'm here to sell shoes or dental equipment or stocks or whatever. Story is the most powerful tool there is to compel a human brain. I mean, it is unbelievable. Did you know that the average human brain spends 30% of its time daydreaming? 30%. And that's actually a survival mechanism. Because if I'm processing a bunch of information I don't need to process, my brain says, hey, let's just check out. Let's think about running through a field. Let's just sing songs in our head. Let's just zone out to protect ourselves and save energy in case the barbarians come. Daydreaming is a survival mechanism. So if we want people to pay attention, we've got to wake them up. Story is a fascinating way to do it. Did you know that when you walk into a theater and the lights dim in the theater, your brain will actually spend 90 minutes to 2 hours to even longer not daydreaming? I mean, you literally will plug into that story and pay attention the whole time. There is no other device that does that to a human brain. Story is it. And the great thing about story is that it's based in formulas. I mean, we've been using these formulas to tell stories for like 2,000 years. I remember when I was writing books for a living, and we wrote a screenplay once, and I started studying stories. I started taking classes and seminars and reading books. It was just like discovering how to compose music. And I just thought, literally, like, you're kidding me. Like, if you do this in the story, and then this, and then this, people will pay attention. In fact, a lot of scholars believe that there's only 7 stories that ever have been told. Literally just 7 stories. And I actually agree with them. If you look at Star Wars and Tommy Boy, it's the same movie, even down to the father issues. You just plug in a different character and a different conflict, and you just take out Darth Vader and you put in Rob Lowe. And it works the same way. It's fascinating to me. In fact, I've got to warn you, I'm probably going to ruin movies for you if you continue this training, because you're going to be able to see from now on what happens in a movie and might even be able to predict what happens next. My wife hates going to movies with me because she knows at some point I'm going to elbow her and I'm going to say, that guy dies in 31 minutes. He does. And she's just like, eat your popcorn, right? Yeah, these things are really formulaic. But in studying these formulas, we're actually studying best practices on how to captivate a human being. In studying these stories, we're studying what people are actually interested in, what they want to hear about. And it's as though story formulas reveal a well-worn path in the human brain. And if we can plant our products and services right along that path, we're going to see a lot more traffic engaging them. And that's what we're going to do. Okay, if you're willing to let me ruin stories for you, I'll show you a template, a formula that is used in almost every story. Now, if we were trying to write a screenplay, there might be 36 plot points that we would have to cover in a screen. But for purposes of clarifying our message, I just want to go through the 7 that I find in almost every story. And I mean 99.9% of stories follow this exact formula. Nearly every movie that you can think about. All right? How does story work? Well, the first thing that you've got to have if you want to tell a story is a character. A character has to show up on the screen, and they'll show up within just the first few minutes. I mean, there it is, a guy, a girl, a dog, a cartoon, or whatever. Somebody shows up, and within an extremely short period of time, we have to know what this character wants. We have to know what they have to accomplish. I mean, we have to know, oh, you know what? This character really loves that girl and wants to marry that girl. Or this character has to disarm that bomb. If they don't disarm that bomb, something bad's going to happen. Or this character is going to have to finish a marathon, right? This character wants a promotion. This posits a story question in the brains of the people watching the movie. And the story question is this: is the hero going to get what they want? And that question makes you so curious that you'll pay attention for 90 minutes or 2 hours through the whole story. But it doesn't work if we don't define what the character wants, and if we don't define it quickly. You say, Don, okay, that's how story works. What in the world does this have to do with me selling more of whatever it is I've got to sell? Well, it's this. We need to define something that our customer wants. When our customer reads our website, hears our elevator pitch, talks to us at a cocktail party, reads our email, and we have defined extremely clearly something that they want, it piques their interest. It's as though we've invited them into a story. But we can't stop there. The second thing that we have to have, if we want to tell this story, if we want to compel an audience, is we have to have a problem. I mean, if you define something that the customer wants, and then in minute 7, you give them what they want, that's called a short story. We want it to be a little longer than that, right? So we have to put a problem in our hero's way. And the problem is maybe the most important thing in the story. The story is really about that problem. The problem hooks people into the story. They're wondering, are you going to be able to overcome this? What does this have to do with our messaging and our branding as leaders and as marketers? Well, it means this. You should always, always be talking about your customers' problems. Always. You should be known for solving a problem, and that problem should be defined. People walk through your door, visit your website, answer the phone when you call, or call you for one reason. They're trying to solve a problem. And if your brand hasn't communicated clearly what problem you solve, good luck. You're not going to grow, because that's the only thing that people are actually motivated to resolve is their problems. So we've got to clearly define that problem. Just like in a story, there has to be a problem that has to be clearly defined. In your brand, there has to be a problem that has to be clearly defined for your customer. And then we know intuitively that, this problem is not going to be solved by the hero alone. I mean, they figured this out back in the days of Aristotle and Plato. Heroes can't solve their own problems. If they could solve their own problems, we would wonder how they got the problem in the first place. If you had a hero that had a problem in a story and they woke up one day and said, I think I'll just solve it, the audience would check out. So storytellers for years have had to bring in another character. And this character enters the story to help the hero win the day. Now, depending on the scholar you read, Christopher Booker, Blake Snyder, Robert McKee, on and on, there's a different name for this character. But at StoryBrand, we just call this character the guide. The guide shows up, and the sole purpose of the guide is to understand the hero's story and give them a plan so that they can overcome their problem. For this reason, the biggest paradigm shift that you will encounter in the StoryBrand framework is you should be positioning yourself as the guide and not the hero. In other words, your customer is the hero of the story, not you. You're the guide. And when we explore this module later, I want to show you the 2 things that your brand needs to do to position yourself as the guide in your customer's story. And there's an important reason for that. The guide is who they're looking for. You think you've got to come out of the gates and present yourself as the hero and say, we're awesome, we do this, we're going to accomplish these great things, look at the awards we've won, look at this. And your customer just goes, well, I'm a hero and you're a hero. If you wouldn't mind stepping aside, I'm actually looking for a guide to help me win the day. And when we position ourselves as the guide, they say, you're the one I've been looking for. Apple does it, Coca-Cola does it, Home Depot does it, Allstate Insurance does it, Geico does it. You will not find a billion-dollar brand that doesn't position themselves as the guide. And there's a reason for that. Because if you don't position yourself as the guide, nobody can figure out why they need you. So we're going to teach you how to position yourself as the guide, both as a leader and also as a brand. After we position ourselves as the guide, there's an important thing that the guide does in the hero's life. The guide doesn't just solve the problem for the hero. That would not work in a movie. The guide gives the hero a plan. A simple, understandable plan that the hero has to execute in order to win the day. And we'll look at some examples in movies of that later. But it's also true with your brand. And so we're going to spend some time talking about how you give your customer a plan that invites them to do business with you. It's going to be a critical part of the success of your marketing efforts. And then the guide has to call the hero to action. Heroes don't take action on their own. Heroes actually are not the strongest character in the story. The heroes are weak. They don't know if they can get the job done. They're afraid. They're ill-equipped. The guide, on the other hand, is very strong, has already won the day, and is here to teach the hero how to do so. That's one reason that the customers aren't looking for another hero, because heroes are weak. I'm looking for somebody who's strong. And when you position yourself as the guide, you position yourself as the strong one. Heroes don't want to take action on their own. They're usually unwilling. And so the guide actually challenges the hero to take action. The guide actually says, look, you got to move, right? We got to get going. We got to solve this problem. Let's go. And the guide is the one who challenges the hero to move the story forward. It's true in stories, and it should be true in businesses too. And what this means for us is if we haven't very clearly called our customers into action. I mean, if you're not saying, I want you to buy this, or I want you to do this, or here's how I want you to do, if you're not saying that very, very clearly, customers don't recognize you as their guide. They're looking for you to be the expert, and they're really looking for you to tell them what to do. It's not because they're stupid. That's not the idea here. These people are encountering 3,000 commercial messages a day. They need you to communicate very, very clearly about what you want them to do. And then, the final two elements, none of this matters unless there are stakes in this story. And what I mean by stakes are, something has to be either won or lost by the hero. I mean, for the hero, this thing has to either end in tragedy or end in a great success. And if that isn't foreshadowed or foretold all the way through the story, this thing might not go well. He might not get the girl. She might not get the raise. She might not finish the marathon. He might not destroy the villain. If that isn't seeded through the entire story, we have no interest in the story. If there are no stakes in the story, there is no story. What does this mean for our brand? Well, it means we have to very clearly communicate what our customers' lives can look like if they engage our brand, and we have to very clearly communicate what their lives will look like if they don't. If we communicate what their lives will look like if they engage us, and what their lives might look like negatively if they don't, we've put stakes in our customer's story. It's these 7 elements that create the story brand framework I want to teach you. And if you can filter your brand through these elements, you will create very clear messaging points, and you will be inviting your customer into a story that they really want to dive into. You'll engage them in the language they already speak.